Good afternoon, guys. All right, welcome to week 14 of Freedom Deals Live. As usual, do a tech check. So just get confirmation from you that you can hear me, you can see me. Pop it in the comments, and then we'll kick off. So this is a pretty cool one. I've got to say, this is probably the most interesting thing I've had under contract for a little while now over the last couple of months. So yeah, that is one of the things when you get into deal finding is it's not a constant stream. You know, you can go through periods where you do tend to lock down a number of deals pretty quickly. And then there can be dry spells where you just really don't find anything that's overly interesting. So yeah, just be mindful of that. And yep, Evelyn, thanks, appreciate it. So as I said, this is a live deal. This is something we have under contract right now, and we are working through due diligence on this right now. So for that reason, I am attempting to keep certain things confidential with it. If you know the area, you're probably going to recognize it. I just ask you to respect the confidentiality and the fact that I am sharing this, I guess, with a generous spirit and just assuming people won't take advantage of that. So for those that are new to Freedom Deals Live, what we do here is we actually run live due diligence sessions. We go through deals in real time. So this isn't pre-recorded typically. This isn't, I haven't gone through this in great detail beforehand. You know, you're watching me stumble through it because I want you to get the idea that it's a journey of discovery. It's at no point do you just get magically perfect at this. And okay, just wanted to see what that error message was. You know, it is always a journey of discovery. It is always a journey of looking at, okay, what are the potential issues, what are the potential challenges, and can we discover an appropriate solution to them? So right off the bat, and one of the things with the due diligence journey is you're really trying to cross off as many things as you can and do things in an order of priority that also minimizes the amount of investment you do into your due diligence, both time and money. So that is something that takes a bit of time to figure out. If you don't have someone looking over your shoulder, if you're working with someone, they can help you with that order. Otherwise, you can very quickly end up spending $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 or more in due diligence unnecessarily. So that's what I look at when I go out to have a look at a site, or when I first do a desktop look at it. I'm looking at what are the potential deal killers. What are the areas of this site, or what are the elements of this site that could either make it undevelopable, full stop, or uneconomical? Because there are sites that physically, or they can technically be developed, but the cost of doing so can be so horrendous that it just makes them completely unfeasible. And sometimes that means that a price adjustment is needed. Other times it can literally just mean that that property is actually better off being sold as a lifestyle property rather than a development site, because the cost of developing it is just far too high to justify actually going ahead with it, which, you know, look, is a challenge in the marketplace because typically agents have no clue about that. The vendors typically definitely have no clue about that. You know, so they tend to work on a comparison model where they see, oh, you know, Joe Blow's site sold down the corner and it sold for 1 million. So mine's the same size and looks similar, so mine should be 1 million too. Not necessarily. Joe Blow's down the road might have had water and sewer right in the footpath, so it was just plug and play and just connect in. Yours might be sewer down the road and you need to run it 100 meters, extend the main, run all new connections, come under the road. You might need to go underground power as opposed to overhead power. You might need to fill your site to achieve a legal point of discharge, and they might have had a perfectly sloping site. And all of these things can make a massive difference into what you should pay and what you can feasibly pay for a site. So this is a little bit larger than the ones I've been showing you of recent times. And there's good reason for that. Like I say, I really do recommend starting in that 1 to 2, 3, maximum up to 5 space. I certainly wouldn't recommend searching for a 5 lotter for your first project. I definitely would recommend aiming for a 2 or 3 lotter. But really the crucial thing is you don't want to end up in a place where you're having to do roads, biobasins, water retention, all those sorts of things. You really and having to deal with the Land Sales Act. You don't want to cross that bridge on your first project. So if you stay under 5 lots, you tend to avoid all of those things. All right, let's kick off. So first of all, let's check everyone's awake. What do you see? Okay, so we've got a rather large site here. It's around 5,500 square meters. what pops out to you immediately as things that catch your attention? These could be things that are possibilities for the site, good things about the site. These could also be things that are not ideal. What are the question marks here? Like those things that you look at that and you go, oh, okay, not sure about that. I probably need to investigate that more. And especially when you start out, often what you're going to come up with is, okay, I see this thing. This looks like something that needs attention, but I have no idea what to do with it, and I have no idea what it's going to cost. And that's fine. To be completely truthful, those questions never change. It just changes how many things fall into the bracket of things you have dealt with before. And the bigger the sites and the more sites you do, the more new things you come across, and you just get better at dealing with those challenges and knowing where to find out those answers. So what do you see, guys? So we've got roughly, let's call it 67 meters of frontage. That's not an exact number. And we've got about 5,500 square meters. I'll give you the rough play of the zoning here. So the zoning in this area, it allows for minimum lot size of 600 square meters, minimum lot frontage of 12.5 meters, and that is a hard, fast 12.5. This council does not negotiate on that at all. So yeah, minimum lot size, 600 square meters, minimum frontage, 12.5 meters. Look, that's, I think, all you need to know to get started. So what sort of a configuration do you think we could do here? How would you suggest, if this was your project, how would you go about this? And remember, there are no silly answers here. You are definitely going to get way more out of doing these sessions if you get actively involved in this and try and come up with these ideas as though this was your site. If you're just letting me throw the information at you, it's very unlikely to actually stick. Best is get involved and have part of the discussion. Okay, so we've got Roland, road/highway to the north, so noisy. House in the bottom left is in a good spot. Buildings that would need to be demolished and rear block sizes. Good question. Okay, so let's start from the top. So yes, to the north, well, at least, I haven't actually looked at the compass there, but yes, to the top of the screen there, yes, there's major road. The good part about it, it is quite elevated. I mean, you could say good, bad. It is quite elevated and hidden behind trees. So it's actually less imposing when you're there than you might expect, but it's still there. So yes, it is definitely something to note. House in the bottom left is in a good spot. Correct. I could not ask for a better spot for that house, which is really good. So, we should be able to retain the value of that existing dwelling, which is definitely a plus. Why is it a plus? Possibility of renting it throughout. So income during the process, and obviously there's a dwelling. That's something you can sell at the end. And it's a risk reduction thing, because one of the things with dealing with land is if the market turns and you're there trying to sell land, you can't rent land, certainly not for very much anyway. Whereas with a house, there is always that possibility of renting that house to sustain any sort of a slow period in the market. And other parts on the property need to be demolished or sold. Remember, as a developer, you are a part-time scrapper, salvager. So anything you do see on the site where possible, sell it. Be amazed what people buy on Marketplace. That's basically the Christmas fund, is what we can sell off the sites. So, but yes, one way or another, they need to be taken care of. And with those sorts of things, often if you can't sell it, you're better off actually getting rid of it for free, because then you don't have to pay to have it removed. So it really depends on your timing as to, if you've got time, great, sell the stuff, get it all gone. But if you've got a demolition crew coming in 2 weeks' time, forget selling it. Try selling it, sure, but then do whatever you got to do to just get rid of it for free, so you're not paying to have it removed. That's a win as well. Okay, so rear block sizes. Look, what's going to play more here is work on 600 square meters. There's a few factors to that, but look, work on 600 square meters for rear lots as well. But here's the kicker: in this council, you can only have one rear lot per access. So for each rear lot driveway, you can only have one lot coming off that. Whereas in many other councils, you can have a rear access driveway and you can have multiple lots coming off that rear access driveway. This council does not allow that in terms of standard freehold, nobody corporate. So what do you think? I've got Roland involved. Evelyn, where are you guys? The other ones? What's happening? So what do you think? What potential layout could we do here? How many lots? I mean, I've obviously given you a hint in the email coming out. I'll give you another hint that we've had more. We've evolved since I sent that email out and discovered some new things, which is some new challenges as well as some new opportunities. But let's see, what do you come up with? What do you think would be a place to start? It doesn't need to be exact. Just look, I think you could get this many lots at the front, this many lots at the back. Where should you start? Like, what would you look at here? I am going to wait. That is the beautiful thing of a live recording. I'm not in a rush, guys. Come on. All right. I always get Roland. I typically get Evelyn. How about the others hiding out in the background? Get involved. That's how you learn. Don't just sit there in the back just listening. Get involved. Have a guess. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. It really doesn't. But if you want to get the most out of these sessions, take advantage of it. I won't run these sessions forever. So don't take this for granted as these things will be here whenever you feel like it. I never planned on running these sessions. I don't know how long I'll run these sessions. So always assume that this is the last session and make the most out of it. Okay, Evelyn, 3 at the back, 3 at the front. Okay, so we're getting 6 lots. So basically, I imagine that would look something like we cut a block off for the house and we have 2 more lots at the front. And then you're suggesting 3 blocks at the back, each with their own driveway. Okay, cool. Roland, 5 lots and 2 in the rear. So you're suggesting 3 across the front, 2 at the back. Depends on the minimum width or rear of access drive. Yeah, spot on. So in this council here, typically you need to allow 5 meters in width. They are wider. Some of the more high density councils, 3.5 meters, even sometimes 3 meters is enough. In this council, 5 meter rear access driveway. So yeah, look, I'll tell you, doing 3 rear access driveways, not sure there's enough frontage for it in keeping the house and achieving 12.5 meter frontages on the other blocks. But yeah, you're on the right track. Like, you're on the right track. So let's have a look at a first crack that we did. So for those of you that know me quite well, I've just come back from a week skiing away, and this one we actually got under contract while I was away skiing. So the rule for my team was I basically did not want to receive a phone call unless it was getting a site under contract. And so I got a message saying, contract in your inbox, sign it, please. So this was the one. So when I got back, this was the first draft my team had put together of a potential layout. So you can see keeping the house there, very generous lot, 950 square meters, another 2 lots at the front, and the 2 rear access driveways. And so if you look at so we've got 5 meters on each. Do we have enough room to fit another rear access driveway frontage wise? Well, if I do the math, yeah, we do actually, because we need 12.5 meter frontages on each of them. And we've obviously got 16.5 at the moment, and we only need another 5 meter width. The kicker to that though is it's a lot of land lost in rear access driveways. It's a lot of land, which is not great, but and then again at the back, we've got 1,340, 1,672. So we've got a lot of land at the back. So without doing the exact math on it, yeah, it does appear that we could get another rear access driveway down the back somewhere, and another lot at the rear. So look, I think achieving 6 lots based on what we're starting with here, and that was my take on it when I got back and had a look at it, was like, yeah, look, I don't think we should be aiming for 5 here. I'm very confident there's a way we can squeeze a 6th block out of it. Okay, so that's where we started. And like I said, I want to take you on the journey. So you see that this isn't just a thing where bang, just all falls together. It's always a problem-solving journey. What else do you see when you look at this? So from what you've learned in the sessions here, what other things pop up as like, okay, that's interesting. We better look closer at that. And I'll give you a hint, it's in front of the property. So it's not in the property, it's in front of the property. What jumps out to you there? What's unusual? Or what's incomplete? There's another hint. Because for those of you that have never done a DA before, one of the things that you learn pretty quickly and you definitely want to know before you do your first project, otherwise you might be caught out, is when you do a DA, it gives the council an opportunity to have you pitch in for any work that needs to be done in front of the frontage of your property, even though it's not inside your property. And it may be work that they have budgeted for the future. But if it's in front, if it's in your frontage, typically only if it's on your side, they can ask you and basically put that as a condition in your development approval list of conditions that you need to complete that work at your cost. And sometimes that can just full stop kill a development. You know, I had one a few years ago where we'd amalgamated, I think it was 3, maybe 4 sites. It was looking great. But then they went, oh, look, we've got a master plan. And to do that, you're going to have to upgrade the intersection, which is, I think it shared a bit of the frontage of our property, to a 4-lane intersection both ways, traffic lights, all this sort of stuff. And the project and the property values were nowhere near high enough to foot the bill for, you know, we never even got it budgeted because it was just, you know, we knew it was obscene, but let's say it was somewhere between 300 to 500,000 or something. Like, it was crazy for that size project. If you're doing 50 lots or 100 lots, okay, you can probably absorb that, but not when it's a smaller project. Okay, so suggestions. All right, cul-de-sac. Footpath is incomplete around the cul-de-sac. Weird footpath. Footpath, would this be the end of the water? Would this be the end of the water? While I start talking, Evelyn, if you can just clarify for me what you mean by would this be the end of the water? Okay, so yeah, you're spot on. All right, so we've got a new footpath there, which is interesting. But then, yeah, they've kind of got this, and just, you wouldn't be able to see from here, but what this is here is basically the curb channel continuing on through there. So the drainage runs along here and it just continues straight. This actually rises up on the same level as the footpath. I presume it's there as a turnaround point for refuse trucks. So yeah, they've got this really weird cul-de-sac situation going there. And that is definitely something that stood out to us straight away was, are they going to ask us to do a cul-de-sac head here? It's very possible. So that's something we won't know the answer of without engaging with council. And I think it really depends on what their future plans are here, because currently this road terminates here and then a walkway goes underneath here. But then this is roughly a 20-meter wide land allocation. And it's the same on the other side and then connects into a new estate. So it's feasible, it's possible that that's actually an allocation for a future road connection. If it is, they probably won't ask for the cul-de-sac to be done. They might ask for some tidying up to be done, potentially, but they probably wouldn't ask for the cul-de-sac. But if that's not their plan for the future, they probably will ask for a cul-de-sac, or at least us completing this side here. You know, there's a number of different discussions we can open up with council there about like the future master plan for this over here. You know, would the master plan include this being a road going along here? You know, but the point is we don't know. And depending on what they want done here, it could be a substantial cost. If it's just a case of leaving what is there currently and kind of expanding the situation, at least we're not ripping it up and starting from scratch, and there's probably road base there and all those sorts of things. So it may not be a huge thing, but it's going to be something. You just know that. So that there is definitely a big question mark and something that needs to be addressed, because it has the potential to be a huge cost. And on what looks like, call it a 6-lot subdivision, that's a big cost for a 6-lot subdivision to cover. You know, when you're talking a purchase price of, I actually forget what we've got under contract for, but let's call it 1.5. When you've got a project that you're buying for 1.5, if you tag on an unexpected cost of a couple of $100,000, I'm not saying that's what that is, but if it was that, you can see how the numbers, it's a big issue. So that's definitely something we need to answer, and we will have a pre-lodgement meeting with council to find out what their appetite is here and what they're looking at. Okay, now the next thing which you can't really see here is the footpath here is what's called like an open drain. So it's not piped, the stormwater, the footpath kind of goes down in the dip, and that's the drainage solution on the footpath, even though these houses actually do have curb adapters. So it's somewhat been updated, but somewhat not, because down here, it all goes into this drain and then it's piped from there on. So I would venture a guess that we will, at the very least, need to pipe what is in front of our footpath and probably connect it into this drain down here, I would suggest. So that's something we need to allow for. The other question is what is the legal point of discharge for this site? That is definitely another very important question, because it is slightly lower. It's a very flat site, but it is slightly lower than the road. So if it was a case of it being curb and channel, yeah, don't see how that's going to work without filling the site. And that's an expensive situation, because then we're doing a hell of a lot of retaining and having to bring in fill and earthworks and all the rest of it as well. So there's a number of questions that I've got in this, and I actually don't have the feedback yet. So this is something that we're working through currently is, are we allowed to drain into this? You know, this is public land. It's a possibility we may be allowed to drain into it. I know you can drain into parks. I know you can drain into a number of other things. I've never had this exact example. So that's something we're investigating now is, can we use that as the legal point of discharge? The next thing is if we pipe this stormwater all the way up here, is at a great enough depth that the whole site could then drain to what we've now piped, because that would obviously be lower than the road level. So there's a few different possibilities here. Don't know. We'll find out. So these things are all part of our due diligence now, and you can see how if it's a case of just piping it to the footpath, not that big of a cost. Yeah, it's a cost. It's thousands, maybe even tens of thousands. But in the scheme of things, relatively, that's a cost that we can factor in now, and it's not a drastic measure. If you had to retain the whole site and fill the whole site, yikes. Okay, there we're talking an entirely different level of number. So watch this space for that one. Don't know the answer to that yet. And just to answer any questions, this here is privately owned by this little community thing here. So not really any option to drain there either. So anyway, that's a question. Don't know the answer to. We will find out. All right. Any other questions on this before we move to the other services? Are you finding this interesting? If I don't get a comment from you, I'm knocking you off the chat. So this is a bit bigger than we normally do. And like I said, there's reasons for that. But yeah, it's not that far away from where you would start. This could easily be I would suggest probably ideally a third or a fourth project, maybe not even a second one. But all right, good. Jemana gets to stay on and Evelyn gets to stay on. The rest of you, if I knew how to flick you off right now, you'd be in danger. Okay, so let's move on. Let's have a look at the services. Oh, okay, I've lost the tab. Okay, so Energex, let's start there. Okay, so I can tell you it is overhead power in the street. Now, one of the things to remember with overhead power is just because you've got overhead power in the street, even if it is just a 1 and a 2, thanks, Roland, I appreciate the explanation, Mark. Even if it is a 1 and a 2, just because you've got power in the street doesn't mean you're going to be able to get power overhead. And I'll give you an example, because you need a direct line from the power pole to your property, to your dwelling. And it's not allowed to cross over any other properties. So if you think about that, if you've got a power pole directly in front of your property, okay, you might be able to get 2 wires off that straight to the new houses. But if it's right at the corner of one, it might be able to get across to one, but it won't be able to get to the other house without crossing the first block. Now, in some councils, they will allow you to do a private power pole in your property. Not all councils allow that. This council in particular does not like them. So we've got actually 2 other sites at the moment where if that site was in a different council, overhead power every day of the week, private power pole. Because it's in this council, they won't allow it. It's going to have to go underground. That means we now need to engage an electrical engineer. We now have design cost, which is substantial, and then the construction of the underground power. So with this one here, reality is because we're talking rear lots, there's going to be design anyway. And we've got that much frontage. The chances of being able to get all of them overhead power is like slim to none. So with this, we definitely need to allow for underground power, design and construction. Obviously, depending on how many lots, that will make a difference to the cost. Now, stormwater, this is an interesting one. Okay, so if we look over here, we've got head walls and we've got pipes. This is actually under that main road and in that walkway that is going through there. And then you've got what they've labeled as channels and nodes. Now, I've got to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what they're indicating there or if it's even relevant anymore, if that's actually up to date based on how this has been completed. So, because the way this is located, to me, that looks like that drain that is actually capturing the open drain and then pipe from there on. It's just the alignment doesn't really line up to it either. So again, dial before you digs is really just an indicative thing. You don't get too caught up in them. So it's still just highlighting that as something we need to talk to the engineers about. Is there's no obvious solution here just yet. But it opens the question again as to, yeah, can we just drain to here? If we can, that's great. Or does it need to be piped down to here? Yeah, there's a lot of questions. NBN. All right, so property has an existing NBN connection. NBN is in the street, but it stops here. So we would be needing to extend it. So there is definitely going to be some extension of the NBN network, and we would have to anyway to the rear blocks as well. Telstra, we don't care about because we've got NBN. Don't mind about that. All right, the good old water and sewer. Okay. What do you see, guys? What do you think? So for those that are new to it, have a look over here at the legend. So dark blue is a reticulation main. Light blue is a trunk main. And without getting too technical there, typically we cannot connect into a trunk main. Reticulation main, typically we can. And then we've got a hydrant here. And then the brown is the sewer. So the manhole over in this property here. And then F stands for sewer fittings. And obviously this is the connection for this property here. So the good news is the main does actually extend into our property there. I'll give you a tip already. So what else are you seeing, guys? Does this look like a site that can be serviced, or is it in trouble? What do you think? All right, guys, don't get quiet on me now. What do you think? Water and sewer, can we do it? Or do we just throw this one in the trash now? Or what are the questions that we need to ask our consultants? You know, where to from here? And I'll tell you this, I never buy a site based on the dial before you dig, ever. Number one, dial before you digs are historically not that accurate. They can be inaccurate, but there's a lot more to the picture. I'll give you another example. So another site that I'm working on at the moment is one where we knew we were going to have to extend the sewer. I think it was like 20, 30 meters or something. Now, what we didn't know was that the sewer was about 6 meters deep. Yeah. So when you think of 6 meters deep, if you actually put yourself in the position of being the person that has to do that work, think of what's involved there. You've got to dig down 6 meters, but how do you actually do that? In a footpath, how do you get down 6 meters without it all caving in? Well, the holes need to be reinforced. There's a whole raft of things that have to happen there to actually make it a safe environment to dig down 6 meters to actually get to that sewer and work on that sewer. So all of a sudden, this sewer has gone from being maybe a $20,000 or $30,000 exercise to over $100,000 exercise. That is not visible on a dial before you dig. Even our engineers didn't see that one coming. So that was only when we put in the request for the connection that this became apparent. And that's just an example as to why you don't do deals on fine margin. You got to do deals that have the ability to absorb that if it happens. Obviously, you hope it doesn't. And for most deals, it doesn't. But if you're going to do 5, 10 deals, you're going to have that happen at some point. And then it's just a case of, oh, well, it happened on that one, but the rest will fine. Okay, so let's have a look at what you've got. Water, reticulation pipes on the other side of the trunk main could be difficult to connect to. Where's the existing connection? Yep, so if we have a look at M water service, now that doesn't actually mean that's where the connection is for the house, but I haven't looked where the water meter is yet, but it does have connection to water, so we know there's obviously water coming across the street somewhere. Doesn't mean we can use that connection. Typically, you do need to bring a new line across from the water main. And yes, 100%, we would need to get these services most likely potholed and identify exactly where the services are, so we can identify, can we get the services across? Now, the good thing with water is, remember, it's pressurized. So it can go up and down in bits and pieces and all those sorts of things. It doesn't need to be like sewer needs to be at the perfect gradient, consistent gradient, so you don't have ponding and all that sort of stuff. Whereas water, there is a lot more flexibility. So the likelihood is that there is a solution here to getting the water across. Could be difficult to connect to where, yeah, okay, so sewer should be okay. Water could be a problem from Jemana, and I presume for the same reasons that Roland's suggested. Sewer looks fine, just a matter of planning where the easements should go. Very relevant point. And the other thing too is you're planning not only for the easements, but how to keep the smallest amount of sewer. The least amount of work, the least amount of pipes. Like, what is the most effective design? Which sounds simple, but as soon as you start doing multiple lots, it can actually get pretty interesting and creative as to how do we do this with the least amount of manholes. Another thing, it's not just so you might be better off running the sewer a bit longer if you can reduce the amount of manholes, because manholes are expensive. And typically you've got to do a manhole every time you change direction. So you can almost make a kid's game out of how to design sewer as a puzzle to keep the cost down. And has Unity Water got maps that show the depth of the sewer? So yes and no. Yeah, it's an interesting one. So sometimes their designs do have it. Sometimes their designs don't have it. Sometimes their designs do have it, but it's inaccurate. I personally prefer to just get it potholed, which means physically located, and then 100% for sure. That's not something you do straight off the bat. Obviously, we tick all the other boxes first and go, all right, well, assuming we can confirm that these things are in the right location or a workable location, we're wanting to go ahead. And that's when you do the potholing. That's when you spend the money to do that stuff. But there's obviously other things we need to address first to find out for sure whether it's worth doing the potholing. Okay, and to add a bit more context to that, the reason why I say they don't always have it and it's not always accurate is, particularly in this council, but this is true for a lot of councils, is you got to think of how long these councils have been around, how long the records have been accurately kept, how things were 50 years ago. It was a bit more kind of just throw it in the ground and fill a hole, no one will know. But also in this case, these have been many councils that have been amalgamated into one larger city council. So there was the ways it used to be done and the ways it is done now. And yeah, you just don't know how the council was run before or the utility provider was run before. So how accurate that information is. Okay, so look, with my thoughts on the sewer is, look, it's a promising start because it does have an existing connection into the property. One of the things with that, though, it is the end of the line, and that sometimes can be a capacity issue. So there is, yes, we've got access to the sewer main. Good. It's in a reasonable location. I think it's in a workable location in terms of the fall of this property. My biggest question is capacity. And the only way that we will find out about that is to lodge what's called a SAN, a services, I won't get caught up on the acronym, but basically you're finding out for sure from the utility provider, do they have any issues with the capacity here? So water looks workable, sewer, promising start, need to know more. And then what might this look like? And this obviously plays a part into how we're going to do the costings for this. It's going to be an estimate at the moment. That's fine. It's just a first cut run. Now, there's obviously going to be an existing connection going to that house already. So there's something there already. But if we're going to have these lots across the front here, question as to what's going to be the best way there. I would suggest it's probably run it up here, manhole, and then run it across so it goes across the back of all of those blocks. And then potentially it could just be one run along here and the front blocks connect in off it. There'd be an easement over it, and then the back blocks also connect. You have a property connection coming off it as well. So it may actually not be that bad in terms of how much sewer we've got to run. That would be a promising start. Okay, so before we move forward, there's one other little thing I'm going to throw at you, which this is where it gets cool. This is the stuff I love. And the beauty is if you get good at this, it can pay you really well. So a mentor of mine suggested a better way of asking questions. Ask bad questions, you get bad answers. Ask good questions, you get better answers. If you don't like the answer you get, ask a better question. And this can be used in very simple things and also very important things. And so this was the design that was put in front of me. And then I was told that, look, our town planner thinks we can get a 6th lot out of it. All right, so my screen share has just dropped out. One of these days that'll stop doing that, but that's okay. We don't need that for the moment. Let's just bring that back up again. Okay, so our town planner thinks that we can get a 6th lot. It's like, okay, great. Can we get a 7th lot? The response I got back from my team was laughter. Let me rephrase that. If we could get a 7th lot, what would that look like? Seems like a simple change in words, but what do you know? We figured out a possible way that maybe we can get a 7th lot. So not just a 6th lot, but a 7th lot. So wherever possible, and I just realized I've only shared that window, not the screen. Give me a second. Okay. So where possible, you want to avoid doing things that involve a body corporate. That's a given. You ideally don't want to have that stuff. But it's always a case of risk and reward, and what's the cost, what's the reward? And in this case, it may just be worth it. So the only way in this council where you can get multiple blocks off one access way is either build a road, which you obviously don't want to do on a project of this size, or what's called a community title scheme. And effectively what that does is it turns the driveway into shared property, into community property for the properties that are using it. That does mean there's a sinking fund. That does mean, pardon me, there's a body corporate. It also does change setbacks and bits and pieces on the lands. There's actually a bigger building envelope you can use on that land then. So is that sort of a block as desirable as a typical freehold block? No, it's not. So you do need to factor that in. I would say, though, that they are becoming more accepted purely because people are getting less and less options. So in a world where affordability is key and getting access to land is very difficult, these sorts of things are starting to be viewed as a lot more normal and more acceptable. Still not as good as just freehold, not having to share any property, but it's becoming more acceptable. And if it means we can get a 7th lot out of it, and reduce the amount of land that we are losing to access handles, so then we've got more sellable land. So if you think of that, if it reduces the amount of the dollar per square meter rate that we get to sell at by 5%, but we get to increase the saleable land by 5 or 10%, then the net effect is actually a positive. So I'll just close that so it doesn't confuse matters. So this is a potential layout. Would it be accepted? We'll find out. But in theory, it works. So we have common driveway. Then we have roughly 600 square meter blocks at the back. They all fit the minimum 600. They all fit the minimum frontage. This one here, look, currently it's 565, but look, this was a first run. You can tell this was done in pencil. You can't exactly drag lines when it's done in pencil. You can tell we've got additional land here. We've got additional land here. So with a bit of pushing and shoving, there'll be a way to get this above 600. So in theory, this looks like this could actually now be a 7-lot project with community title. Now, What warning did I give you at the beginning that this is now in breach of? What warning did I give you at the beginning about site size and what happens when you crack 5 lots? Now, this is a bit of a magic pill, so you want to pay attention to this. This is where being a bit tactful with your applications and being strategic with your applications is very important and can make a big difference. You got to have a bit of imagination. So remember, what warning did I give you at the start about the number of lots and what are the flow-on effects when you crack 5 lots? Roads, Biobasin, Land Sales Act. Yep, all good answers. So yes, as soon as you go over 5 lots, typically you're going to have a biobasin, which means you probably lose a lot because of the amount of land needing to be utilized for it. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to build a road because you go over 5 lots, but yes, often it does. And yes, the Land Sales Act. But what's most, I guess, important in the discussion at the moment is the loss of land to a basin. And yet can't sell before DA approved. Well, actually with Land Sales Act, in theory, you can sell after DA approval, but really in practice, you need the disclosure statements, which you typically can't prepare until you've got OpsWorks approval. So it pushes the can even further down the road. But the way we can work with that and sort of play with that is staging the application or separating it into 2 applications. And I'll give you an example. So let's say that the first DA we lodge is a 1:4, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4 lots. It's 1:4. Doesn't trigger the Land Sales Act, doesn't trigger a biobasin or water retention or anything like that. Woohoo. The second application we would lodge is a 1:4, turning this rear lot into 4 new lots under a community title scheme. Now, both DAs, both development applications, are under 5 lots. Does council know that we're attempting to do that for that exact reason? Yep, typically they do now. You used to have to be a lot more sneaky about it. These days, a lot of councils are actually kind of happy for you to do this because a lot of councils actually don't want biobasins and water retention basins. It is yet another utility facility that they need to maintain once it goes out of the developer's maintenance period. They don't love that. So if it's workable, they're quite happy to not see those things happen now. So that is a way to actually avoid those triggers in not all instances, but in many instances, which increases the amount of land you have to develop, decreases the cost of your development because you're not building those basins, which typically cost 30 grand upwards. It can obviously make you more competitive in your bidding process. So my view now is we are now chasing 7 lots here. So we've gone from 5 lots to 7 lots. The other thing too here is why, I always encourage to ask the question is how can you make the project better? But particularly when I started looking at this going, oh, okay, there's a few potentially expensive things that may eventuate here. We're going to need as much yield as we can get out of this site to be able to offset those costs if they do eventuate. Of course, even if they didn't eventuate, I'm going to be happy about the additional profit. But that's all, some would look at it as going, oh, I'm trying to maximize profit. In my head, I'm trying to maximize risk mitigation. I'm trying to reduce the amount of risk because the bigger the margin I've got, the lower my risk. Questions on that before we move on to feasibility, because we've gone way over time already, but it's been worth it. I will move on to feasibility now. Now, I will say, I'm going to use the normal feasibility template that we use in these sessions because I want continuity in what you're seeing to make it easier to interpret. Personally, I have another template that I use for larger projects, and that is what we would typically use for this one. But we're going to do what we can with the existing template. Okay. All right, so now we are talking 7 lots. All right, lead-in period before construction starts. Now, look, depending what we uncover it with these other elements, this could still be a relatively straightforward DA. there are definitely some of these things that I've flagged and some other things that we haven't gone through that may change that. But otherwise, these could be two relatively simple DA applications. So I don't expect them to take a particularly long time. But I think just because there's a few things there, at least one of them tends to pop up and create complications, which then creates delays. So I'm going to add a little bit additional time on that side of things there. Construction period, yeah, look, 4 to 5 months should still be fine. There's actually not a lot to do there. That's plenty. And then titling and settling period 4 months. I think that's fine. You can see that's only tipped us to 19 months, which I normally say minimum 18 months. So I think that is reasonable for this project. Again, during this due diligence process, there are definitely some elements that we've identified that could change that and may have me go, no, we need to allow a longer time. All right, we'll come back to the buffer, but that's a good place to start. All right, purchase price for this. I should know these things, but I don't get excited about them until they're going somewhere. I think it was 1.65 is what the contract price is. All right, sewer. All right, we are talking, what was the width we had there again? No, it was on the other one. Oh, lost it. Anyway, doesn't matter. All right, so I'm going to estimate 60,000 for the sewer. Where am I coming up with that number? Look, I will say it's largely just an educated guess at this point. I'm not too worried about that at this initial point. I know I'm going to have to do a couple of manholes, and I know I'm going to have to run that sewer, I would say at least 40, 50 meters. So I think that's a reasonable place to start. And you can see there that we normally allow 5K per additional connection. Well, 5 times 7, 35. And I'm adding some additional there for the additional manholes, the additional run. For water, we say 5K per additional connection. That obviously brings you again to 35. But we know we've got to cross the road. We know we've got to run some down the rear access. So look, I'm just going to suggest again that we just start at 60. I think that's probably overkill for the water. But at this early point, I'm not too concerned about that. Stormwater, huge question mark. Huge question mark. So what's the best case scenario here? The best case scenario is that we are draining off to the side there into that road reserve. Even if we are doing that, there is still going to be internal piping and drains. So I'm going to allocate 30,000 to that. Now, again, I am shooting at the hip here. This one's one of those ones where it's not so straightforward to just go, oh yeah, look, it's 20 meters, that's going to cost you 10,000 or whatever. Like there's a lot of variables on this one at this early point. So the pendulum currently has a long way to swing. So really all we're looking at the moment is like, does this potentially have legs? House demo, we're not doing any house demo, but there are other things on the side that need demolition. I'm just going to allocate 15 grand to that. There's not much there. Erosion and sediment control, I'll look in that. I'm going to include in my civil works and those sorts of things. So I'll just leave that for now. Rear access driveway. So we've said 15K in here. That probably is a bit outdated now with concrete costs. Again, what have we got there in length? Lost those ones. All right, so if the block depths were about 40 meters, we're basically talking about 40 meters. And I know in that scenario there where we're doing a community title, it's got to be about 8 meters. So we've got about 240 square meters of concrete. It's a lot of concrete. So what would I allow for that? Yeah, again, shooting at the hip here, I'm not even going to bother trying to work out math for this exercise because we're already way over time. But look, I'm going to suggest 70 grand. Could be way off. As I said, at this point, and I'm emphasizing this for you. Can you see how unconcerned I am with these numbers right now? Learn something from that in your first run of FISO. Footpath, yeah, interesting one because some of this brand new footpath we're going to have to damage and fix because machines have to get across somehow. Which at the moment we could do there. So we may actually not need to do that much, but we're going to have to bring water across. And if we're having to redo that stormwater, it might get damaged with that. So yeah, look, it's very much a how long's a piece of string question at the moment. I don't know. I don't know how much of that we're going to damage, but we're going to damage some of it. So for the moment, I'm going to allocate 20 grand. Seepage pit, no. Turf, there's definitely going to be some, but I'll allow for that in just general civils. Retaining walls. Look, at this point, I'm assuming no. So I am assuming no, but as we talked about for the stormwater, that could change quite drastically. Fire hydrant, yes, there will definitely be a fire hydrant required at the back. And fencing, definitely going to be fencing. So as you guys know, I don't encourage you to fence the internals because the builders allocate that cost in their pricing as well, but it also makes it feel smaller. But we do want nice fencing around the outside. So what have we got here? 80, 80, we'll call it 70. So 160, 230. So we're going to roughly 230 square meters of fencing. We'll work on $120 per linear meter. All right, so we've got about 27 in fencing. Tree clearing, that's already allocated in my 15,000 above of site clearing. I'm not going to allow a reno at the moment. I haven't been inside the house, so I don't know what condition that's in. And look, I may not want to do the reno. I might just want to leave it as it is and on-sell it. But what I'm also going to factor in is that my sales price is unrenovated. If I later choose to renovate it, I'm only going to renovate it if I can see that I can get $2 from every $1 that I spend. And yep, so we'll just delete that as well. Okay, so now I've said that I'm going to allocate a few things there to general civils. So the point is, at the moment, it's tricky to even estimate that because we don't know if we need to fill this site or if we need to do any earthworks to achieve a legal point of discharge or any of those things. So the truth is I've got no idea what that number is yet until I get some answers on these other things. But on a project of this size, to not allow for some earthworks, it's pretty, it's pretty wishful thinking. So I am just going to, make an allocation of 50,000. You might be going, where am I pulling these numbers from? The point is, at the moment, I am just pulling them from previous experience and what I feel is adequate. And I would rather be on the heavier side at this point and go, all right, where are we sitting roughly, than being, on the light side. And look, this may still end up being on the light side. What have I got here so far for civils? How does that actually look? I've got 400 grand. What's that work out at? Divided by 7 lots. It's about 57,000 per lot. Look, that actually sounds about right. So if you're building a road and you're having to do all the lots off a road these days, good luck getting under 100 grand a lot. Typically ends up at like 100, 110, 120, even for a really clean site. But on this, we are getting lots with frontage. We're only doing the rear access driveway. We're not doing a basin. So being around 60,000 per lot to me at this point sounds reasonable. So that's kind of my, finger in the air test at the moment is going, that sounds reasonable. We could be in the ballpark, but I also understand at the moment there is a very wide range that it could go. So just keep that in mind. It is only the first run. Okay, so these things here, well, if we're doing that many lots, we need to increase the contributions. Get one credit. All right, so 200 grand in contributions. Woohoo, that's your brown paper bag. All right, now we are way over time, so I'm not going to go through every single one of these online items. Most of these are going to be too small because those allocations there are typically for like a 1 and a 2, 1 and a 3. And we know for a fact that we're lodging 2 DAs. So I'm just going to double that straight off the bat. I'll actually make it 7 grand. And yeah, I'm going to make that 20. And electrical engineer, we've allowed for good. Actually, did I allow for power communications? Oops, sorry, lost my, love how it does that. you go. I don't think we did anything for power and telecoms. Power and telecoms, we're allowed 25. What does that work out per lot? 3.5 per lot. That's, when we add we've got 13 down the bottom, 13 plus 25 equals 38 divided by 7 lots, about 5,500 per lot. That's a bit on the lean side. So I'm going to move that up to 30,000. So when you're doing these multi-lot situations, what you often end up doing is more of a per lot cost. And yeah, power and comms tends to these days end up being somewhere around 7, sometimes up to 9,000 per lot, depending. So that's why I'm doing that little adjustment there. As I said, I'm recognizing that some of these costs are going to be too small, but as you know, and we've talked about, the biggest costs are your sales prices, your purchase price. Civils is actually a small component. So if I'm out, and consultancy, if I'm out by 20% on my consultancy, I'm out by 60,000. Okay. Sounds like a lot of money, and it is, but when we get to the revenue, you'll understand why in this initial run of FISO, I'm not too concerned. And again, I'm concerned with time. Okay. So now I can tell you, this is what my guys put together. This is a snapshot of the other FISO. This is what my guys put together as their initial run based on initial feedback from our marketing groups. And that was for 5 lots. So the house was going to be on, it was roughly 800 on a 950 square meter block, keeping in mind, that wouldn't have future development potential. So now we have shrunk that block a little bit. So I'm just going to suggest that we make that 750 for the moment. And then we've got, in this case now, we've got 6 other blocks. Now, again, I'm not going to get overly caught up on time here. On the accuracy, just because I am mindful of the time. But we had, for that size block, they were 750s. So look, I'm just going to put a round number in and just say average them out at 590 for the time being. And again, I'm not claiming that that is on the money. This is early days, and a lot more is needing to be done. But you can see here now why, when we're talking that many lots and that amount of revenue, if I'm out by 60 on the consultancy, that's not what's going to make or break the feasibility or tell me whether this is interesting or not just yet. All right, now this is the reason why I would say this particular template is not really the best setup for this style of development, this size of development, and it's more to do with the finance model, because this finance model is really designed for when you buy it within just a standard investment loan, and then you go and fund the construction probably with cash. Whereas when you're talking a development of this size, you might still buy it with an investment loan, but then you're probably going to refinance it over to a commercial construction facility. So we'll do the best we can with this model, but just telling you straight off the bat that if you and I were working together on this one here, we wouldn't use the template mainly for this finance reason. So let's say it's 7% interest rate, and we're buying it at 80,000. Sorry, 80% loan. So what I'll do to try and I'm going to do in this model. I'm just going to say we've got an interest rate in there of 12% for an investor to kind of balance things out a little bit. So you can see that adds 150,000 in interest costs. All right. So yeah, as I said, acknowledging that as a finance model right now, this is not particularly accurate, and I wouldn't go making decisions based on it. But let's have a look at where that has us sitting. All right. Well, if we're even close, that's bloody exciting. 43%, 1.2 million. Do I think that's correct? No, I don't. I'll tell you that right now. I don't think that's correct. So my gut tells me that we're probably a little bit inflated on the land sales there, and we may be shy on construction. Look, I do expect that if we can get the 7 lots, I think the FISO is going to look quite healthy, so long as we don't get smacked with that cul-de-sac, because that's one thing we haven't allowed here is the cul-de-sac, because we just don't know. But look, let's see if we said for the cul-de-sac that we had to allocate 100 grand to that. where are we sitting then? All right, well, look, we're still sitting very healthy. Okay, so if we have to fill the site and I need to throw another 100 grand at filling the site, still looking very healthy. Now, again, the finance model here is definitely not, in the right area. So I would not at all take those numbers to be something to get excited about. I'm excited a bit, but I just wanted to keep it simple with that. So what we might do is, if I end up going ahead with this project, we might run a separate session. Well, actually, let me ask you, would you like to run another session on this project if I go ahead with it, where I actually take you through the feasibility template that I use? And obviously by that point, I will have answers to a lot of the questions that we've raised today. Actually, maybe put it, even if I don't go ahead with it, would you like us to do another Freedom Deals Live session on this particular deal once I do go through the due diligence process and answer those questions and see where we land? Evelyn, yes. Cool. That's a very low take-up rate. So if we've only got one Evelyn, we might not do it. Or maybe if it's a private session, apparently. All right, well, if there's only one of you who wants to do it, I'll take that as a no. I think that would be an interesting exercise to do it. But if it's only of interest to one, then I won't do it. So look, this is certainly interesting. There's a lot of water to go under the bridge here. What I hope you take away from this is, what I find is that a lot of people starting out at this point would feel overwhelmed. And look, that would not be misplaced, because if you're starting out doing this sort of a thing with this many open-ended questions, that would be overwhelming, and I definitely wouldn't recommend doing it on your own. But even if you'd done a few projects, a lot of people would kind of just reach overwhelm at this point and maybe walk away. What I'm trying to show you here is, notice that I don't have answers to things yet either. The difference is I'm not in overwhelm because I've done it many times. So I know where I've got to go. I know what I've got to do to get to these answers, or at least I know the track I've got to go down to give me the best chance of getting to these answers. Sometimes you do reach a point where you just can't get the answer, and you just need to walk away because you can't get the level of certainty. But that's really the difference. It's not that I necessarily know all the answers straight up. It's I know what the process is to get the answers, and that's what gives me the confidence to move ahead. That's what has me go, okay, here are the things that we need to answer in this next couple of days before I go spend money on a pre-lodgement meeting. If I answer these three things and they are positive, I'm ready to spend money on a pre-lodgement meeting, book that pre-lodgement meeting. And then while we're doing that, then there's, okay, what are the other things that I need answers to, so that when I get out of the pre-lodgement meeting, which will be 3 or 4 weeks away, once I get out of the pre-lodge, what do I need to know the answers to be able to actually interpret that pre-lodge? How do I then move forward? Because I know these people terminated on someone else because they asked for extra time. So I can't be cavalier with the due diligence period in this. I have to accept that I may not get additional time if I ask for it at the end. So that's really the difference, is just learning the path, learning where to get the information, and over time developing a sixth sense of, it feels like something's missing here, or this doesn't add up. And which already happened on this too. Actually, my conversation with my town planner, he originally came back to me on my thing about 7 lots and gave me an answer. I went, no, I don't buy that. And here's why. And I gave him a bunch of reasons as to why I didn't think he was right. And he went, you might be right. I'll go look more. I'll look into the scheme and I'll find X, Y, Z. And so, that experience led to me having that ability to go, no, I don't think you're right. I don't know the technical part. I don't know the part in the scheme that gives us that answer, but it doesn't feel right. Something's wrong. It doesn't make sense to me. Please go look further. Find the relevant parts in the scheme. All right. Definitely over time, but I think that was really worth it. Was that worth it for you? Because this is, for me, this is always an interesting thing in that there's the things that I know people need. It's not necessarily always what you think you need. So sometimes I'll finish a session and I'll think I've delivered you amazing value, and you'll be sitting there going, why did we spend so much time on that? And it can happen the other times where I think what I've delivered wasn't great value, and you guys will be jumping off the rooftops going, this was fantastic. So how was that for you guys? Was that worthwhile? And did you find that interesting? Did you get a lot out of that session? Just give me some feedback, because it helps me decide which deals I put in front of you in the future. And noting that I did get a lot more yeses there for running another session on this deal. So yeah, okay. Based on that response, I will run another session on this deal. Yeah, look, it's going to be 4 weeks until we have all the answers that we're after, at least. So it'll be after that. But yeah, watch this space. Evelyn, you mentioned the blocks had to be 600 meters, but you had one at 565. Yes, correct. Maybe that was a part where my audio cut out. But what I did also say was that there was enough scope in the size of the other blocks that I know we'll be able to shift boundaries around to achieve the 600, because we've got excess in the other blocks. It's just that that particular one there was hand drawn by one of my team who's a qualified surveyor. And it's not like a computer program where you can just click the line and, you know, drag it. So once you kind of get to that point, you're sort of committed to that design. It's a bit harder just to change things from a meter here and a meter there. But yeah, based on the excess we have in the other blocks, I'm confident that with some slight changes on the boundaries, that we'll be able to get that lot above 600. But yes, good pickup. All right. Good session, guys. Good questions, good interaction. Definitely seeing some evolutions happening with some of you there and the types of questions you're asking, which is great. Yeah, I will see you next week. Thanks very much.